I have served as a senior delegate of the Vethrani sovereignty for 31 years. In that time, I have watched empires collapse over procedural disputes. I have watched wars begin with the signing of the wrong clause and end with the filing of the right one. I have seen chambers full of the most powerful governing bodies in the known hold their breath over a single word in an amendment. I know what it looks like when an institution believes it has cornered something. I know what it looks like when it is wrong. I was in the gallery of the Unified Accords General Chamber the day they formally threatened the human mission. I want to be precise about that word. Threatened. Not censured. Not cautioned. Threatened. The distinction matters because the Accord had spent the better part of 4 months crafting language careful enough to carry legal weight and blunt enough to be understood by a species they had already decided was too young and too minor to parse nuance. They were proud of the draft. I heard Secretary General Voth Oren read it into the permanent record herself, her voice measured and deliberate, her secondary eyes tracking the human section of the floor to catch the moment the words landed. The human mission occupied a single table near the South Corridor entrance. There were 3 of them. A translator who spent most of the session studying the ceiling, a junior aide who had not yet learned to keep her expression still, and the envoy, Soren Adler, who sat with his hands flat on the table and said nothing. He had said nothing for most of the morning. The Accord's formal threat was a structured instrument, 7 provisions, each escalating in severity, beginning with suspension of observer credentials and ending with coordinated exclusion from every treaty-adjacent body the Accord had standing to influence. Voth Oren read all 7 provisions without pause. She had rehearsed this. The chamber acoustics in the Accord's General Hall are designed to be unforgiving. Every syllable arrives at every seat with equal weight, and she used that to her advantage. When she finished, she set the document down and looked at Soren Adler and waited. The Accord's full membership waited with her. 412 delegates, 17 observer bodies, of which the Vethrani sovereignty was one. The chamber was not quite silent. Environmental systems never permit true silence in a hall that size, but the quality of the sound changed. It became a held thing. Soren Adler looked at Voth Oren. He did not stand. He did not lean forward. He reached to the inside breast pocket of his coat, withdrew a single folded document, unfolded it once, and placed it flat on the table in front of him. Then he put his hands back where they had been, one over the other, and looked at the Secretary General and waited. He was waiting for her to ask. She did not ask. She was too practiced to show the uncertainty directly. But I watched her secondary eyes go to the document and stay there for 2 seconds longer than decorum permits. Then she adjourned the session for a procedural recess, and the chamber erupted into the particular noise that governing bodies make when they are pretending to consult while actually panicking. I learned the contents of the document the same way most of the chamber did, through the Accord's own archival disclosure system, which processed the filing automatically because the filing had already been entered into the permanent record 11 days earlier. The system flagged it as routine. No one in the Accord's administrative bureau had reviewed it closely enough to understand what it was. It had sat in the queue alongside maintenance schedules and observer credential renewals and the ordinary paperwork of a body so large that its left hand could not always account for what its right hand had already signed. It was not a response to the threat. It could not have been. It predated the threat by 11 days. It was a registration instrument. Soren Adler, acting in his capacity as primary signatory of the Terran Consultative Mission, had filed a founding charter for a parallel consultative body under Provision 12 of the Accord's original constitutive document, a provision so old it predated the Accord's own secondary governance layer by 6 years, which meant it predated the authority structure the Secretary General herself operated under. The provision had never been used. It had never been relevant. No mission in the Accord's history had been small enough and quiet enough and procedurally patient enough to need it. Provision 12 allowed any recognized observer mission that had been denied full participatory credentials for more than 3 consecutive cycles to establish, unilaterally and without further approval, a consultative standing body using the Accord's own administrative infrastructure. The body so established would hold co-equal archival access, permanent record filing rights, and, This was the clause that produced the noise I heard from the gallery, standing to submit binding procedural challenges to any instrument issued by the General Chamber. The Accord had denied the Terran mission full participatory credentials for 4 consecutive cycles. They had done it deliberately, as a signal of the human mission's unimportance. They had not checked what that signal triggered. I watched Voth, Orin's legal counselor, spend 40 minutes in a room adjacent to the main chamber. I know this because I was in the corridor and I could hear them, though not their words. I could hear the register of the conversation, and that was enough. When Voth Orin returned to the floor, she looked like someone who had been told that the building she was standing in was not, technically, the building she thought it was. She asked Soren Adler if the Terran consultative mission wished to respond to the Accord's formal threat instrument on the record. The question was framed as procedural courtesy. It was not, he said, without standing, without raising his voice, without any particular inflection. We filed our response 11 days ago. That was the entirety of his statement. He folded his hands again. The Accord spent the next 3 sessions attempting to find procedural grounds to invalidate the Provision 12 filing. There were none. The provision was constitutive. It could not be amended without a unanimous vote of founding members, 4 of whom had not been present for a general session in over a decade. The challenge mechanism the Terran mission now held standing to invoke had no expiration. The consultative body Soren Adler had registered was, by the Accord's own foundational law, permanent. The formal threat instrument was never executed. Voth Orin issued a clarifying statement 12 days after the session, describing the Accord's instrument as a framework for dialogue rather than a punitive measure, language that appeared in no version of the document as drafted. The Accord's archival system dutifully recorded both the original instrument and the clarification in the permanent record side by side, where they will remain as long as the Accord exists. I submitted my session notes to the Vethrani Sovereignty's Foreign Affairs Directorate the evening after the recess. My director asked me, in her reply, whether I thought the humans had known what they were doing from the beginning, from the first cycle they were denied credentials for years ago. I told her I thought they had known from before that. I thought Soren Adler had read the Accord's constitutive document the day the Terran mission first applied for observer status, found Provision 12, and then waited. Patiently, without complaint, without ever raising the provision in session or mentioning it in correspondence or giving any signal that they were aware it existed. For years of silence. For years of flat expressions and unread documents and sessions where the Terran table produced nothing and said nothing and asked for nothing. For years of the Accord believing it was managing something minor and contained. The document was already filed when Voth Orin took the floor to read her 7 provisions. She was performing a threat at a table that had already been moved. She simply did not know it yet. My director asked me one more question. She asked what I thought the humans would do with the standing they now held. I looked at my notes for a long time before I answered. I thought about Soren Adler's hands, flat on the table, perfectly still. I thought about the junior aide who had not yet learned to keep her expression still, and the way she had looked at the Secretary General in that moment, not with satisfaction, exactly, but with a kind of patience that had finally been relieved of the need to keep waiting. I wrote back, I don't think they will use it immediately. I think they will let the Accord know they have it. That is, I have come to understand how they work. They do not require the door to be opened. They require only that everyone in the room understands who has been holding the key and for how long.